I recently tested my vitamin D levels, and to my surprise, I was shocked. I actually came back as deficient. Now, it's not shocking that I was deficient in vitamin D because 42% of you are estimated to be so. However, I thought I was doing the right things in order to not fall into a state of deficiency, yet my results plummeted over time. So I'm going to share with you where I went wrong and what I'm doing to course correct. And also, I want to give you this information so this doesn't happen to you, because vitamin D is critical to your health. So let's go ahead and dive in. Before we do, I'm Dr. Nick Zyrowski. Thanks for hanging out with me on the channel today. I want to first tell you how important vitamin D is to you. First of all, it's the only vitamin that your body is capable of making. So when the sunlight hits your skin, your body's capable of making vitamin D. And then it's also the only vitamin that every cell in the body has a receptor for, because it's that important. Yet many of us are falling into deficiency, and it's very disruptive to our health. When you fall into a deficiency of vitamin D, you're more likely to have diabetes, cancer, infections, allergy issues, hypertension, brain disorders, and even autoimmune conditions, which so many people are suffering from today. Now, how much should you be taking? Well, if you look at the National Institute of Health or the Institute of Medicine, essentially they say take 600 IUs every single day. Then when you look at the Center for Responsible Nutrition, it's quite a bit of contrast there. 10,000 IUs of vitamin D3 per day. So why the big difference in numbers? Well, I would say this is where many of us get very confused, because nobody can agree on how much we should take. And in fact, if you're like me, you probably have been told in your life at some point that be careful of taking vitamin D. It's dangerous. It's taking too much could really harm you. Well, the reality is that most people aren't taking nearly enough because they're so afraid to take it. In fact, I even learned in school, be careful of vitamin D. So how much was I taking? I was taking 5,000 IUs of vitamin D a day, and yet I still had my vitamin D results plummet in my body over time. My levels dropped from my last test to my most current blood test that I did. Let's see where I went wrong. So first of all, I think that I wasn't taking my vitamin D regularly with fats. When you take your vitamin D with fats, it helps you absorb it better. So if you take your vitamin D and you have maybe an avocado, some olive oil, something along those lines, it's going to absorb better. So that is one quick tip that I think I could definitely implement into my life a little bit better. Now, the next thing with vitamin D is we have to make sure that we're choosing the right form. I was doing this right. However, I want to share this with you. It's important to make sure that you're taking vitamin D3. I talk to people all the time that tell me they're taking just plain old cheap vitamin D they found at the grocery store. Vitamin D3 is important to take because it's the active form. It's more bioavailable. You're more likely to actually be able to absorb it and utilize it. Now, the other thing that's important to take with your D3 is K2, and you really want to have them all together in one. You don't want to have like a bottle of D3 and a bottle of K2. It should be all meshed together in one. So taking D3, K2 is important. The K2 is really important because if you're taking high amounts of vitamin D3 without K2, you'll start to build up a lot of calcium in the body, and that calcium can go to your arteries, to your kidneys, to your organ systems. The K2 keeps the calcium out of the organ systems, out of the artery, and in the bone where you want it. So you have strong bones. Okay, so you want to make sure that you're taking the D3 with the K2 and you solve a lot of problems. Now, another big mistake is just not taking enough vitamin D. And this is what happened to me. You know what? I live in a cold climate. I'm indoors a lot, taking care of patients all day. And as a result of that, I don't get out in the sun that much. And because of this, my vitamin D plummeted. So what I'm doing now is taking vitamin D3, K2, 10,000 IUs a day, matching the recommendations by the Center for Responsible Nutrition. And what I'll do is I'll put a link in the description below to the vitamin D3, K2, 10,000 I'm taking every day, okay? And in fact, in order to get my levels up, I'm taking 2 capsules of it every day, which would equal 20,000 IUs. And I have been doing this, and I will continue to do it for a total of 3 months, and then I will revert back to just plain 10,000 IUs a day. So I'll put the 10,000 IU that I'm using in the description below, and I'll also put a 5,000 in there for people who are are looking for that lesser dose. And obviously based on climate and how much time you spend outside, that would determine whether you would take a higher dose or a lower dose. If you work in an office space and all day you're not getting out in the sunlight, sun's not hitting your skin for at least 30 to 45 minutes a day, then you're going to want to make sure that you take that higher dose of vitamin D. Now, the next thing that you want to make sure that you're doing correctly is taking it at the right time of day. Something I do right, but a lot of people do this wrong and it can start to mess with your sleep cycle. Take your vitamin D in the morning. You can also take your vitamin D with magnesium, so pair it with another nutrient in order to help it absorb a little bit better. Magnesium can help with the utilization of vitamin D3 a little bit better. You also want to be consistent. I know that I wasn't consistent with taking my vitamin D. You know, I'd have days where I'm super stressed and I'd forget to take it. Then I'd have days where I was back on, and, you know, just try to be consistent with this stuff because consistency is obviously really key here. Now, one of the reasons I also believe that I had a deficiency that not too many people talk about is that I went through some different troubles with my gallbladder. And when this happens, I know you guys are so surprised to figure this out. Like I screw up and I have health issues and I have to, you know, combat these things just like you do. I don't walk around in a perfect life. I still have health issues I'm constantly dealing with, but you know what? I talk about them and I fix them and I move on. And that's the key. You're always going to have health issues that pop up, but if you address them and take them head on, your life can be so much better. So I was dealing with a little bit of gallbladder issue. And what happens is if you have like inflammation in your gut, if you have gut distress, if you have gallbladder issues, or just inflammation in general, you start to not be able to utilize vitamin D as well, meaning that you take it and you're not able to absorb it as well and have it offer you those benefits that it is capable of doing. Therefore, what happened to me probably as part of this whole scenario is that the gallbladder issues, being that vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin, the gallbladder issues actually stopped my body from being able to absorb it in its entirety and as well as it normally would. But I'm just trying to impress upon you, there's reasons as to why you may not be absorbing your vitamin D3 as well as you think you are. So after we move from this conversation of, well, how much should we take? What are the ways to utilize it better? I also want to point out, because I get this question all the time, is can I get enough vitamin D from my food? And the answer is no. If you take one of the best foods out there loaded with vitamin D, that's going to be salmon, and you're still only going to get about 350 to 500 IUs per serving of salmon. So unless you're consuming salmon all day, every day, for every meal, you're just not going to get enough vitamin D from your salmon. And I won't even bring up the topic of milk, because so many people tell me, well, can I get enough vitamin D from my milk? And that is the poorest source of vitamin D. The only other good place to get vitamin D is from sunlight. But here's the kicker, is that you have to be out in the sun. You have to be getting that sunlight hitting your skin. Think like bathing suit, like being outside in a bathing suit for 30 to 45 minutes every day in order to have sufficient levels of vitamin D. So it's very unlikely for most of us that we're going to be hitting that target. Now, as we look at the importance of vitamin D, whenever you're getting a vitamin D deficiency, many bad things are going to happen in your body. And when you have a sufficient level of vitamin D, your body's going to be able to function at peak potential. My score was at a 37, okay? It's considered that 30 is deficient, and in my opinion, 100 is optimal. I was at a 37, meaning that in my book, I was deficient, okay? So I'm going to optimize my level, and the importance of that is that when you have optimized vitamin D, your immune system functions better. You're able to fight sickness off so much better. You're able to combat brain disorders, anything from mood disorders like depression and anxiety, even issues with neurological problems like Parkinson's and dementia. Many of these major neurological disorders to the brain are impacted positively when you have sufficient amounts of vitamin D. Vitamin D is also very important for combating inflammation. It's very important for your bone health. If you're somebody who has a lot of bone degeneration, degenerative joints, your knees are falling apart, your back is falling apart, your spine is degenerating. If you are somebody who gets a lot of cavities all the time, you want to start thinking about optimizing vitamin D levels. And as I stated, it is considered to be okay to have vitamin D levels in the 40s and the 50s. I don't think it is. I think that you want to be right around 100 when you get that test score back. And whenever you get your test, it's going to be from 0 to 100. You want to be closer to the 100 mark, not closer to the 0 mark. And this is how you're going to optimize your vitamin D. As I mentioned before, I put resources in the description below to the vitamin D that I use. It's important to use the right stuff that's bioavailable, that will get you across the finish line to be in a good, healthy place. I'm Dr. Zyrowski. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I bet you'll like this one next.